Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Gans. Welcome to episode 2 of Badges to Briefcases. I've got my co-host Ian Wise.
Good morning.
And we're here together from Gans Law to talk to you about today's topic, which has been in the news lately, which is Florida's quote-unquote new gun law.
Florida's gun laws are about to change. Starting September 25th, anyone who is legally allowed to own a firearm will be able to openly carry in public.
38 states have open carry. It's not something that's controversial.
Florida residents can now openly carry guns statewide.
So we've been seeing a lot of news stories on this, right?
We have.
And there's a lot of questions. Some people are questioning it. They're concerned. They want to know more about it. I've read and looked at a lot of the news stories and then researched the law. And I think there's some confusion to be cleared up, right?
Yeah, for sure. And anytime we talk about guns, it's a very big hot button issue across all of society.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. So let's just get into it then.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So first, do you want to explain what is the quote unquote new law?
Yeah, well, before I do that, there's a big common misconception as far as what is the law. So people hear that, oh, there's a new law about carrying concealed weapons in Florida, but there isn't a new law.
Right.
So a law is a statute, and the statute, at least as it's still written actually, prohibits the open carry of firearms in the state of Florida, right? But a court came by and made a decision. And as attorneys, we think of those as laws, and it can kind of be used interchangeably, but it's not a law, right? It's a court decision that says this law is unconstitutional and essentially can't be enforced.
Right.
It's still there. It can't enforce it.
Exactly. When I looked into it, I found the same thing. I said, well, hold on now. I looked at the law. The law is the same that's on the books.
Yeah.
When I say the law, I'm talking about what the Florida legislature has passed. Correct. That law is still on the books. It has not changed.
Yeah.
But what I learned is that there was a case out of the first DCA, correct, District Court of Appeals, that basically held that the Florida open carry prohibitive law is unconstitutional. Is that what you came to as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So not necessarily a new law, but a new interpretation of the law saying it's unconstitutional.
Yes.
And also I saw a news story. I think the Attorney General came out of Florida saying, this is the new law of the land, which again, the AG, the Attorney General, is in the executive branch. Executive branch doesn't make laws, just like the judicial branch doesn't make laws when the new order came out. So the Florida legislature is the only branch of government of the three that can make a new law. So
absolutely.
So we maybe expect in the next legislative term some changes to be coming?
Possibly. Some laws just stay on the books and just never get enforced.
Right.
There's still a law that you cannot impugn a woman's chaste.
We would have,
and not safe for work, kids. Sorry, but essentially you can't call someone a whore in Florida. It's a crime.
It's funny because there's actually a lot of laws on the books that I think people would be shocked to know.
Yeah.
But like you said, unless it's being enforced, no one's getting arrested for it, and you're never going to know about it. And I think it's going to be the same with the open carry law.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was a second-degree misdemeanor before.
Yeah.
So you could be facing up to 60 days in jail, $500 fine, and be a convicted criminal essentially. And then now it's not illegal at all, according to the district court. Right. And because there's no contradicting district court in Florida's 6 DCAs, I guess the first DCA controls, right?
Yeah. And when you hear the term DCA, that means a District Court of Appeals. Thank you for explaining. Yep, that's okay. And the way Florida is set up, a lot of times we think I'm going to take it to the Supreme Court. That's where I'm going to go. Florida is designed to where if a district court makes a decision, that it applies across the whole state. Barring some sort of conflict, then the Florida Supreme Court would step in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's my understanding now that law enforcement is being advised by their either chief of police, sheriff, whoever might be the head of the agency, to not arrest for open carry.
Yeah, I've seen some agencies doing that. You mentioned the Attorney General. Just because he says it's the law doesn't make it the law, like you said, but he can direct state agencies to not enforce it, kind of like the federal government does not enforce possession of marijuana, even though it's still illegal.
Yeah, great analogy. Absolutely. So what do you think is the strength of that District Court of Appeals opinion holding the law to be unconstitutional?
Well, it follows both the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, and I believe it was Bruin, a recent Supreme Court case about the possession of firearms. They looked at the history of the country and the foundations and principles as related to the Second Amendment, and they found that New York's law wasn't constitutional. And in following that, Florida, the First District, not only followed the United States Supreme Court, but they also followed Florida's long-standing policy and, I guess, emphasis on a person's right to have firearms. You can also see this in the concealed weapons law that we have. For example, you can't have a concealed weapon in a vehicle without a permit. That's a separate topic I think we're going to touch on later. But even if you have it concealed, as long as it takes at least 3 steps to access it and use it, courts say that's not a concealed weapon, even though it is. So I think this follows both the United States Supreme Court and Florida's history related to the possession and guns.
Yeah. So I think, should be the new law of the land and upheld. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Since you did touch on it as the date of this filming, there was another recent update on gun laws, which occurred not too long ago. And that's overturning the long time, prohibition on carrying concealed weapon without a permit. So it used to be, for those that don't know, you used to have a permit to carry a concealed firearm. Now it's not required anymore.
And, well, the little point of clarification, it is required if you're in your vehicle.
There are so many exceptions when it comes to the gun laws. Absolutely. And yeah, there's so many. And just for an overview of it, it was something where you could, beforehand, had you not had a permit, be arrested for third-degree felony.
Yeah.
So you'd be a felon now. And for now, something that could be completely legal. So, and now we've now progressed now to the open carry, which is different. Before, if you're carrying a gun concealed, you're out in public, no one can see it.
Yeah.
Open carry is in the name, open. So with that, you're going to have people with a sidearm on their hip, yakking around in public. Can they go anywhere with the firearm?
Well, yes and no. It's the iconic lawyer answer is it depends. Any private business can still prohibit you from bringing a firearm inside. That's not state action. They can do what they want. I know Publix recently said that they will allow it. A lot of sporting events won't. And there are also some government buildings that you can't take it into. You can't take it into a school, even with the permit. Yeah, unless you're law enforcement.
So what I'm hearing is you can bring your gun to Publix.
Yeah, for now. For now, at least.
Because they're private companies, they're allowed to make their own rules. They want to adhere to it. Some private companies could say no.
Absolutely, and a lot of them do.
Okay.
I think the example I brought up was sports arenas. You go to Kia Center to watch a Solar Bears game, and it doesn't matter if you're legally allowed to carry a firearm, they won't let you in if you have one.
Okay. What about the courthouse?
So the courthouse is an exception, and because that's a government building, and they have a reason to keep it safer than other places. Okay. And so there are specific statutes. You can't bring it in there. There's all the signs. The exception is if you're law enforcement going in as a law enforcement officer. So, for example, if you're a police officer and you're getting divorced and you have to go to court, you can't take your gun with you. You still can't do that.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah. But they're, following this policy, we might see some changes. For example, at a library, right? If the city or the county prohibits carrying a firearm, right? Well, following this logic and following the policy and what's going on, the courts might make the city or county give a good reason why.
Right.
That's different than a normal building.
Sure. So legitimate interest. And if they don't provide that, then presumably people could be carrying guns in the public libraries. And it'd be interesting to see the implications as this gets rolled out and to see how the community responds to it.
Yeah, there was a recent trial court decision. We just talked about the appellate courts and how that can be applied across the state. It's not the same for trial courts. A trial court makes a decision. It can be appealed, but there was a recent trial court decision after this new first DCA case that held that the law that prohibits persons under 21 from having a handgun is also unconstitutional.
Interesting. But that was at the trial court.
Trial court. So it's not across the state. It's not established anywhere else, but it points the direction that the courts are likely going to head.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to remember, because they take these little sound bites from the media. Oh, open carry is allowed now. Well, it's not. Listen, it's not allowed in the places you just stated. Things will be changing all the time.
Yeah.
It's not allowed for people under a certain age, and it's not allowed if you're, doing something with the firearm, like brandishing it or waving it around or something. So yes, that's open carry, but it's beyond that, because now obviously, I think goes without saying, you can't threaten anyone with it.
Yeah.
You can't, there's still laws on the books, right? Public discharge of the gun, reckless exhibition, I would imagine. Now it'll be interesting to see how the courts deal with that, but that's maybe the next episode. We'll see how things go on. But those laws, it's important for people to know those laws are still on the books too.
Yeah, and we don't want people to get in trouble because they just didn't know or understand. It might be something we can help them with, right? And that's what we do. We help people when they get themselves in bad situations. But if we can help people understand the law so they don't get there in the first place,
yeah,
that's the bigger win.
Absolutely. And I've represented a number of lawful gun owners who are, good members of society. Unfortunately, it happens all the time where they go down to the airport, they check their bag, they don't realize they have guns or ammunition.
I prosecuted that case, remember?
Oh, yeah.
When I was still prosecuting cases.
Yeah, when you were at the state attorney's office.
We were going against each other.
Yeah. Oh, my God. That one. Things have changed a lot. Oh, my God. Thank you. Yes, they have. Remember? Yes. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And I've had, and even people that I've known that are into firearms and go to the range and stuff, and they give me the call. Hey, I got caught at the airport. I had the gun, and now they picked up a crime that I've got to help them with. So it just, you really got to be careful with this.
So it does. It happens. A little different. I used to live up north in North Dakota, and I went to Canada once, and I was a police officer at the time. And so I always had my gun with me. I always had extra bullets sometimes when I would go to the range or the trainings. And I went through the border. I didn't have my gun because I knew I couldn't do that, but I still had a magazine with a couple of rounds in it, and in my center console, completely forgot about. Luckily, I had the border agent was understanding and respectful.
Were there like Canadian Mounties?
Yeah, there are.
Okay,
they had really cool uniforms. They look very crisp. But yeah, luckily he was understanding, and I think the fact that I was a police officer helped him in his decision. I wasn't just I don't want to say a regular person, but I had a legitimate reason to have normally had it.
Right. And Canada's pretty strict, I think.
Oh, they're very strict. Yeah. And so I was very lucky. I could have landed myself in trouble.
Sure.
So I know how easy it is, like you mentioned.
Super.
You're used to having it. You are in a rush. You forget something. You forget to unpack one part of it. And now you're facing a possible felony charge, depending on where you are.
Guns are powerful, and with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
And, with that, having that responsibility, and you being former law enforcement and myself, we've interacted with people that were armed.
Yep.
We may have known it from the outset or learned that during our investigations. How do you think the new open carry law is going to affect law enforcement?
So I don't know that it is going to affect it much outside of an increase in calls for service. I think a lot of people in the community might not yet be aware of the change, right? Or they might just be concerned when they see a gun and call. And most agencies have a policy where they have to respond to calls, even if it's not a violation of law.
Sure. But I know when I worked for Orange County, in the call notes on the computer, when you had someone report signal 0, which means firearm, it's highlighted right there because it's so important. And so it kind of takes your eye off everything else. Like, when I'm going there, I know there's going to be a firearm involved. Now firearms could be involved in way more situations. I wonder if that makes it more safe or less safe.
Well, I think it can go both ways. And I mentioned, having been from North Dakota, there was a lot of hunting. And a lot of people had rifles and shotguns in their cars. You think of the iconic, I don't want to say redneck. Yeah, it's not a nice word, but you think of someone out in the country, driving their old pickup truck with the gun in the back window, like late for us, and all the time. And I remember going to academy training, becoming an officer here, and we did an exercise where there was a shotgun in the back of someone's car, and I didn't think twice about it. I was paying attention to it, obviously, and there's always safety concerns when someone's accessing it, but a gun can't do anything unless someone's using it.
Exactly.
And they were screaming at me, but I explained why. I was comfortable. I was safe about it. And as officers get used to seeing more and more guns, I think it will be similar. And the reality is, as an officer, you're trained, and you know this, you treat everyone like they are armed. You know,
Yep, you do.
you know, if you don't find one gun, you assume there's a second one, right?
The +1 rule.
Always assume that there's a gun there because you never know.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with the open carry, especially if now you see the person's armed.
Yeah.
Since it's legal, can you disarm them? I mean, it just puts in a whole different just protocol, I guess. I think, and it's something I think law enforcement, I'm sure, has been working through.
Yeah.
And something they're going to deal with.
Well, I think anytime an officer is dealing with a person, the officer has the right to make themselves safe. And in our experience, both as officers and as attorneys, I mean, it's reasonable when an officer knows that a weapon is there, depending on the situation, to remove it, or to make sure it's safe. Now, it doesn't mean he can, search it. It doesn't mean he can try and manipulate it to find the serial number unless it's visible, right? But one issue I do see is if more and more people are openly carrying firearms in vehicles. Now, remember we talked about the concealed weapon. You still can't have it in a car, and my concern is that more people will have guns, and officers will see more guns, and a person might be doing something as innocent as getting their insurance registration and reaching towards the gun. And I urge people to be responsible, like you said, with great power, great responsibility,
Of course.
is to be responsible with, if you are going to have the gun in the car, keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't move them. Let the officer know. Ask, how do you want me to do this? My insurance is next to the gun. I don't want to frighten you or scare you. How will you feel safe?
You're saying let them know.
Yeah.
And would you recommend people carrying a holster or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Always. Well, that's gun safety.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want a negligent discharge.
Right. But now you don't need a permit, right? You don't need a training. You don't need any experience. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah. I foresee a lot of issues coming up. And one of the things that I tell a lot of clients and my kids is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. If you're downtown Orlando, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning on a weekend, busy traffic, a lot of people drinking, just because you got that walk signal doesn't mean you should start crossing. You need to make sure it's safe. If you're crossing and someone wrongly hits you, you might get money from, some injury firm, but is it worth getting hurt? Is it worth dying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, people just have to be safe, have to be careful with it.
Yeah.
It's not just carte blanche, do whatever. There are rules.
Yeah.
And, law enforcement has to deal with it as well. I think, I know when I was in law enforcement, I would find firearms in the craziest places. You find them tucked under seats, between seats, and you're like, holy cow. I mean, it's not, I could have been shot or whatever. I just found them in strange places. What about you?
I not safe for work again. I found guns in all those kinds of places that you're talking about. At one time I opened a door. I just didn't feel right about the contact. Something was weird. He kept breaching. And I opened the door to talk to him, and I had my eyes on him the whole time. His passenger was trying to distract me. And once the other officers got there and we got him out of the car, he was reaching for a gun.
Oh,
that was a bad day. That could have been really bad. But definitely the weirdest place I found a gun was, again, not safe for work. I'm sorry. If you're a little kid, cover your ears. It was inside of someone's vagina.
Oh,
yeah. She and her boyfriend were convicted felons, and we had received reliable information that they had a firearm. And after some excellent interviewing tactics on my part, I might say, I learned that she indeed had the gun on her, but we couldn't find it for obvious reasons. So,
wait.
Yeah,
I don't know if we could air this, but I'm just curious. How did you figure this out?
So we got the information that they had it, and at some point I spoke to the boyfriend apart from the female, and I told him that we had found it, and he was surprised that we had found it. That completely confirmed that I knew it was there.
So you knew it was there. You just said it was there. Find it, and you process of elimination.
Only one place it could have been.
Scientific method. You went through and.
Yep.
Okay. Well.
Yeah.
What's the next topic?
Yeah. That's the.
Thank you for sharing that.
But that's the reality of our professions as attorneys.
Yeah. Well,
we deal with real life, and real life is sometimes messy.
Yes, sometimes very messy. Yes. Well, Good job finding that one. What's the next thing we had on our topics here? Okay. So would you say, man, where are we going to go from here? I don't think we can top that again.
I know, I'm sorry.
Okay. So you said,
I got more stories, so keep watching our new episodes.
he does. He watches stories. Every day I learn more about you. This is great. I love it. It's fun working together. So, but we were talking about, you said before, more calls for service potentially.
Yeah.
So for example, someone shopping at Target, Publix, and calls like, this man's got a gun. And then police say, and yes. And
Yeah. And like you mentioned, the signal 0, the code for a gun, if it's ingrained in officers' minds
100%.
that, man with a gun call, historically at least, has been someone brandishing the gun, using the gun, threatening people with the gun, not merely possessing it.
Right.
And I think that's going to take some time to train that out of officers.
Yeah.
But
But
well, want them to ignore it.
well, you have the legal side training them out. Hey, this is legal now. But
Mhm.
at the same time, you have officer safety
Yeah.
where you have to say, you still have to keep in your mind, hey, it's still a gun. It's dangerous. So I think it'd be a tough time to be in law enforcement with that. But I do want to move on just for time purposes. We're going to try and always take some comments from people that have left posts on our social media. We've had a lot of interest, which is awesome. So the first one that I have here is a comment from Silverado 819. And this is from the video that we did, Burden of Proof, if you remember that one. Okay, so the Silverado 819 asks, what happens when the jury finds you guilty with no evidence? Well, I've never had that happen. Typically, there is some evidence. The jury is going to find you guilty because the burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's the highest burden in the land. It is higher than reasonable suspicion, which the police need to stop you, probable cause, which the police need to arrest you. And once you get to a criminal court and a trial, you're looking at beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt. So the question is, what happens when the jury finds you guilty with no evidence?
Well, that's a complicated topic. And like you said, if you have an attorney who's doing their job, that should not have happened, right? Or at least you should have a record laid for an appeal.
Sure.
So when you get to the end of the state's case, because as a defendant, you don't have to prove anything, right? And the state has the entire burden of proving everything. There are some exceptions if you're raising some kinds of defenses, but generally the state has to do all the work. And once they're done, you move for what's called a judgment of acquittal, or a JOA. And essentially what you do is you go to the judge and outside of the jury, not in front of them, and you say, Your Honor, assuming everything that the state has alleged and is put out there today is true, it doesn't meet the elements of the crime.
Exactly. And that takes it out of the hands of the jury. And the jury, if it's granted, if the JOA's judgment of acquittal is granted, the case never goes to the jury.
Yep.
They will never. So if the judge agrees, even in the light most favorable to the state, there's not enough evidence for a jury to find a conviction. Yeah. Why send it to the jury anyway? So it gets taken out of the state's hands, jury's hands, and the case is essentially dismissed at that point.
But judges do make mistakes.
Yeah.
They are human.
Yeah.
It does happen sometimes. Really, for the most part, they do a very good job.
Yeah.
But things happen.
Right. And so on that note, I'd say that juries, I think, sometimes do convict people with insufficient evidence. Yeah. I wouldn't say no evidence, which is what the question poses, but insufficient evidence, it happens. And that's when you have to go look for a criminal appellate attorney.
Yeah.
Hopefully your trial attorney did a good job laying the record and objecting when
absolutely. And you have to do it fast.
Yeah, there's a timeline on that. Absolutely. So good question though. Let's see if we have any other questions here. We do. Okay, it's a comment from Just Cass from the Double Jeopardy video that we did.
Okay.
The question is it true that if you go to court in a state and they can do it again federally, I assume they mean can you be prosecuted federally after you've been, I guess, acquitted in a state court? So my understanding is the federal laws are independent and different than state laws. And unfortunately, if there's a federal statute that does apply to your situation, double jeopardy would not preclude them from filing federally, right?
And it happens sometimes. It
does. I mean, the feds really have to want it, I think. They're selective on their cases. But if they're waiting to see what happens on the state case, now if the case is so bad that the jury finds not guilty, and it's unanimous and it's a quick verdict, the feds may not want to charge such a weak case, but could they? Yeah,
they could. And it kind of goes back to the Martha Stewart going to prison, right? So like the way the federal laws are written is if you make any untruthful statement to a federal investigator at any time, you can be charged with a felony. And mind you, we don't do federal word murder, but it's if they want you badly enough, even if you're acquitted in the state level, they could charge you with the Martha Stewart crime.
Yeah, there you go. So another rip from the headlines. Next comment we have is from Lilith from the video that we did on, she wants to know what's the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony, no jail, no fine. I think you talked about that misdemeanor and felony difference.
Yeah. The simplest distinction is a misdemeanor cannot be punishable by anything more than a year. And that's in county jail.
Right.
Whereas a felony can be punished by anything over a year. It doesn't mean you're going to serve that time, but it means it could be.
Yeah.
And that's the simplest distinction.
I agree. I think that's the easiest way to put it. There's obviously many layers. You could do a whole video on that. But
A lot of layers in that onion.
yeah, misdemeanor and felony. Yeah, whether you in county jail for a year or in prison over a year. Yeah, absolutely. All right, next comment is from N8MNT. Emanate? Oh, okay, that's pretty clever. From the TikTok video, pulled over for DUI. They asked, what if you get a bad judge and he denies your motions to suppress evidence? Even then, where obvious violations to your right on the police officer's part. So I think what they're asking is, if the police violated your rights, do you file a motion to suppress evidence based on the constitutional violations, and a judge is bad and denies it unlawfully or wrongfully?
Yeah.
Do you have any remedy on that?
Well, again, that's why it's important to have an attorney who knows how to lay the proper record, knows how to object when is necessary. There are times that we see this happen. Unfortunately, the bar for the state to justify a search or a seizure is pretty low.
Sure.
And unfortunately, Florida courts tend to be very pro-state. So this is something that could happen. The officer did violate your laws, or your rights, I'm sorry, but the judge still lets the evidence in. Now, the problem you get there is you can't appeal that order because it's not final. It doesn't dispose of the case. So even if you believe that you have an appealable case, and even if you do, you have to wait until the whole case is done.
Sure, and you can always reserve your right to
Yes, absolutely.
what you want to do.
And you can have that as part of a plea, a conditional plea.
Yes, right.
Right? Hey, we understand that based on the evidence that we have here, it's in our best interest to accept this plea. However, we believe the judge was wrong, and we are going to appeal this. So as part of the condition to the plea is that the appeal would take place.
So,
And if the appeal comes back successful, then the state would then dismiss the case.
right, and these motions to suppress are really significant. I mean, especially on our DUI cases, which I think that, that's what the question is about DUIs. We tons of motions to suppress on almost every DUI case.
Yeah.
And we've had great success with those because we're able to point out the mistakes. So we're both law enforcement officers, so we know how to read the report. We know what the police did right, what they did wrong. And DUIs can be so complex that even if it's just the most otherwise innocuous detail, we sort it out, do the motion to suppress. A lot of times the judges get it right and grant our motions, and at that point the case may or may not go away if it's a dispositive issue. But I will say that even if you get a bad judge and they deny it, you can always do a motion to reconsider as well, and just really put the case law in there, drive it home, and maybe you can get the judge to overturn themselves in a way.
Sometimes. Or at the very least, you're really, really laying down the proper record.
Exactly. Right. Totally. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. I know with the comments, I love taking them. I think we got a little off topic from the firearm issue, but again, it's been something that's been in the news a lot. We want to talk about it. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment. Make sure to like and subscribe the video. Also follow us on our social media. We're at Gans_Law on all our socials, and we will see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.
Take care.